Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here today. My name is Evaldo Oliveira. I'm a Director of Business Development with FairCom Corporation. FairCom is a database company, and I'm going to talk about COBOL 2016 and big data and what does it mean big data with COBOL applications. And I'm happy to see that there's so many people here interested in listening about COBOL. And I was thinking about this presentation here because we're a database company. We keep thinking all the time about data all the time. And that question came to my mind first. What was the first data that has been generated by humankind? Just because I'm a little bit into anthropology, and if you think about that, this is, I brought up a scene here that came to my mind. I'm a big science fiction fan, so for those that recognize this is 2001 Space Odyssey from Stanley Kubrick. You see he's actually killing an animal there, and I think the first data that has been generated is census data. He's killing a tapir there, which is kind of funny because tapir is not really a prehistoric animal. But looking into big data and thinking about the amount of data that's being produced right now and what does it mean for environments like COBOL, for example. There are many challenges involved on that, I guess. So moving ahead here, COBOL by itself, if you guys have COBOL environments right now, you know that there are many challenges already by itself, right? The first one, of course, is cost, right? Keeping a COBOL system is really expensive because it's mainly proprietary environments, and you have to invest in this environment. That there's already a lot of money invested in the environment by itself, so maintaining the environment is not really easy. To make even harder, you don't have many options, right? There are a few vendors around in the market to help you with that, not only with the COBOL environment itself, but to bring you new solutions, which is a big challenge when you think about new problems like the big data. So if you go to the market to shop, you don't find many vendors that are bringing new platforms for this. And of course, there's also the human resource problem. Universities and colleges are not forming new people to come up with COBOL background. So you can see here that the three of them are already a big problem for COBOL systems. But being a database company, in our opinion, the main problem is actually how to integrate your legacy or existing environment data with other systems. For those that are familiar with COBOL, COBOL, it doesn't structure the data in a relational model. So that's a big question. If you cannot handle the data using traditional relational databases, so how do you do that? Because COBOL is on the road for so many years already, most of the systems, these problems have been addressed already in different ways. Our opinion is that there's a better solution to address these problems, and I'm going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, okay? But you see, we like the image of the iceberg here because when you look into COBOL and you think about legacy, a lot of this data is actually very, very important. You cannot just ignore it. It might sound like legacy is something old, but it's not. It's not something you can just let it go. You have to think about it on what you're going to do with this data and how you're going to integrate with the new systems that are coming. And not only the new systems, but also the new data that's flowing that you have to pay attention. And you have to cross this data versus each one of the other. And when you think about legacy, we talk about legacy, but the truth is that, I'm going to show you here, the truth is that this is statistics from IDC. It's an expectation up to how much data is going to be produced up to 2020. But you can see here, we're right here in 2016. This was put together in 2012, I guess, or 2013, I guess. So looking back here, the truth is that the legacy is not 30 years ago anymore, right? So it's not, when you think about legacy environments, you think, oh, data from the 60s, COBOL, data from the 70s. That's not true. The systems are still alive and running and collecting data and processing very critical data. And if you look back to 7 years, you already have a lot of data here that you have to integrate with everything that's coming. Okay? So legacy is not only about data that doesn't matter anymore. Where legacy is about, and systems like COBOL are mission critical right now. They're running thousands of transactions around the world. There are some statistics showing that they're really the main leader in some markets, like, for example, ATMs. Many of them are actually still running a lot of COBOL systems. So this is all big challenge for when you think about, okay, how am I going to make this big data, the amount of data that's coming in the picture here, and talk to this environment. And then, of course, this data needs to be integrated with other systems, like you have to have analytics on top of this data. You have to be able to handle this data with all the social media, sharing the data, not necessarily your back-end data, but definitely crossing your back-end data versus what you're collecting from your stores, for example. And most important, you have to be able to monetize this data. So how to add value to this existing data, looking into the big data market that's coming from outside. So what is actually the big data, right? So the big data, most of us think about big data as something that's above the surface here, right? And it's very complex. For sure it is, because it's not only about, there are the famous three V's here from big data, which is first the variety. The types of data that you have to handle right now is so different and so large. You have videos, you have relationships between people, and you have documents, you have different types of data that are being produced. If you throw IoT in the picture, in the mix, you're going to have sensors collecting information, and you have to process this information. Most of this is digital, but it's also huge volumes, right? So you have this data is being produced in millions of transactions per second really constantly, and you have to find a way first to store it, then find a way to process this data, but most important, find a way to integrate it with your existing data, right? So how do you connect all this here that's coming up here to this environment here? And then there's also the velocity, right, from big data. So you have to be able to cope with all that at the same time while you're processing. So your back-end systems, usually COBOL is handling back-end systems. They process all the data very well right now, the way it is. But the big question here is how to integrate that with these new environments. So I think this is the main challenge. And of course, an easy answer here would be bring SQL to this environment. And I say bring SQL because although many COBOL systems in the past, they have been already updated, or I would say changed their business logic to move on and add relational databases to this environment, the majority of them have not. You still have a lot of systems that they rely on the existing data systems that the COBOL provided in the very beginning, which is not relational. It's completely record-oriented, and it happened to be a NoSQL key-value store system. That's actually what it is, when you look back how it works. So sure, but how do you do that? The answer is NoSQL. Okay? So you bring NoSQL to this picture, and all of a sudden you have the ability to handle the data that COBOL systems are producing and are keeping and are processing, but with a more modern platform. So when you think about modernizing the COBOL environment, a lot of you probably already went through this process in the past, and the focus was mainly on the application. So let's try to find a way to rewrite your application. Let's find a way to automatic tools to try to convert them. And it was never really the focus on the data. With the NoSQL technologies, it's actually, if you switch the focus over to the data, you have a better chance to preserve your investment and have more integration with this environment. So this is what's being called in the market as multi-model databases. Databases that can handle different types of formats of data. In this case here, both NoSQL and SQL at the same time. So it's no big advantage if you have to convert the data, like take the COBOL from the data from COBOL and convert it into a SQL database. That is actually, many projects flopped in the past because of this. This approach is very high risk. The idea is really to keep it in a NoSQL format like it was, like it is, but at the same time, you add SQL capabilities on top of it. So we happen to have a solution like that. C3, it's called c-treeRTG. We have it here in our booth here. We have a booth here. So what it does, you preserve, and I brought here a character-oriented COBOL screen just to make the point here. It works with any kind of COBOL environment. Where you preserve everything as a NoSQL environment. You don't have to necessarily to change anything on the COBOL side. Nothing in the logic, nothing in the application. All you have to do is to adjust your COBOL data to be manipulated by c-treeRTG, which is a NoSQL database, a key-value store database. But at the same time, we have also SQL on top of the same data. So what it does here is that all of a sudden you have your COBOL systems working the same way they were working before, but you also can query this data coming from the SQL interfaces. Like if you have a BI system, or if you have an analytics, or if you have a report system, you can just plug that into your COBOL data and query the data in real time. Okay? So I can show you here. Here's a little screen here where this is a report. It's just using Jaspersoft iReport. It's in this case here, using the free version. But it's a generic report running out of JDBC. So I can just build a report, dynamic report out of the COBOL data without having to change anything in the COBOL itself. So for those that are familiar with the COBOL language, I don't know how many of you are COBOL developers here, but you can see here, I brought this on purpose here. There's something called redefine. COBOL for many, many years allowed you to have different types of records inside the same table. Right? So you can have records of different sizes, records of different formats, different schemas inside of the same table. Sounds familiar, right? Yeah, that's the flexible schema from NoSQL. COBOL has this for many, many years, and it's very important for performance on I/O, accessing the data. Well, bringing this to a SQL relational database, it's a big nightmare because you have to rewrite your application and change your logic. With this approach, you don't have to do any of that. You can keep everything the way it is. So if we look deeper here, what it brings in benefits for you first, you start to manage your data in COBOL as a robust database management system, actually. So you have all the tools, you have all the systems, you have backup, you have everything. It's not just a bunch of files that you have to manage somehow. Improves availability because it eliminates a lot of data corruption, and many other benefits because now all of a sudden you're managing COBOL data as a database, but not as a pure relational database, but as a multi-model database. Plus, you get also disaster recovery and high availability. Our database has real-time replication, so you can have multiple copies of your main database. And most of our customers actually do that because COBOL is very I/O-oriented. SQL is very CPU-oriented, so it consumes a lot of the CPU capability of the hardware. In most cases, what they do is actually, instead of running the transaction system and SQL on the same machine, they just make a replica, a real-time replica, and switch SQL queries over here, while COBOL transactions are running over here, so preserves both sides of the fence. Minimal latency, and what's most important, you can kill all those batch jobs pushing data up and down. We had some customers where they're extracting data from the COBOL system up to the BI system, and the Oracle BI system was taking 3 days. Just extract, they could not run this along the day because it was critical, so they had to wait until the night, copy everything to files, FTP somewhere, convert the data, upload it to the Oracle, and business had the data 3 days later. So today you cannot afford it anymore, especially because of the amount of data that big data is producing, right? And finally, full SQL access. So all of a sudden you have also SQL access to the data and in different interfaces. So you have JDBC, ODBC, we support many different interfaces here to have real-time integration. This here gives you 2 different doors. If you want to stay with COBOL, and many of our customers love COBOL, they don't want to leave it all, you can just integrate it without having to migrate. You preserve your logic, you preserve your applications, don't touch it, just focus on the data and keep everything up and running while at the same time accessing the same data. If you want to modernize this environment, you want to bring different platforms, it's also a good way where you don't have to do a big bang approach. You just don't convert all your programs and applications all of a sudden, which is very risky, high risk. Instead of doing that, some of our customers are developing new modules using new platforms like Java, converting these new modules along the years, and phasing COBOL out slowly along the next 5 or 7 years. So it's a different approach if you wanna find a way to replace COBOL, for example. But the truth is that once you have SQL, you can query this data the way you want, okay? So I guess the key word here is really integration, right? Access your data, integrate your data with big data, not switch your focus from the application environment, which is critical, of course, but has a lot of investment on that. Your business logic works fantastically well. We have many large banks here in the US that they use, they love COBOL, like it, and they don't want to touch it at all, simply because the amount of money that they invested on that is too critical to change it, so they don't want to change at all. So like I said, we are announcing here in the show the new version of this product. It's called c-treeRTG version 2. I have a live demonstration in our booth, so for whoever wants to see it working, I can actually show it how it works, and we can dive deeper a little bit more into the technology. Okay? And I'm kind of running out of time here, so I'm speeding up a little bit here, but I'm almost finished. And again, like I said, I like the analogy of the iceberg. The iceberg sounds like, be careful, right? But at the same time, when I saw this picture here, it really came to me like, this is actually the scenario with data. There is a lot of data here that's hard to reach. It's important, you cannot just ignore it. And this is not really legacy, it's just data that you have to look at that and process that somehow, and at the same time integrate it with existing new environments, okay? So here are my contacts, and I would like to just finish really quick here saying that we are sponsoring a happy hour here after the show here at 5:30 across the street. So whoever wants to join us over there and have some fun, just stop by our booth and get a little ticket, and you're more than welcome, okay?